Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to World of Warships. Once again, we're in a battleship, and it's the German Tier 6 researchable battleship, the SMS Bayern. This is a Tier 7 maximum battle on the map Shards. The teams are a little lopsided. We have 3 battleships, the enemy has 4. We have 4 destroyers, the enemy has 3. I've been playing through a lot of my lower tier ships in order to knock off the snowflakes in the snowflake event. I think this was like 400 coal that I got off of this battle. It's not a lot of coal, but at least it did get me a little bit closer to getting my first tier 10 cruiser, the Salem. Yes, I have the Salem now, but I haven't played it a lot yet. I'm still playing my battleships, because I prefer the battleships. And obviously, since I have most of them now, I can actually start putting some work into the battleship series, but I digress. The Bayern has been a bit of a problem ship for me. You see, I was playing it under the sort of standard German tactic, which is to build it around a secondary build. You can get maximum 7.6 kilometers on the secondaries, which is okay for a tier 6, but at the higher tiers it's more or less, well, it's not particularly great. In this battle, those longer range secondaries probably would have helped me out quite a bit, but they didn't because I don't have them on the ship anymore. I've built it instead around accuracy, because without the aiming systems modification, this ship is woefully inaccurate. You know, because it's German and it only has 8 guns, and it got to a point where I just figured that playing it with a secondary build was just a waste of time. You just weren't hitting the shots that by all rights you should have been hitting. Even at the close brawling ranges that this ship is kind of designed for. And honestly, if you're trying to brawl in a tier 6 battleship, then you're doing something wrong. Like, yeah, the Bayern's designed for it, but if you're trying to brawl in this, don't. Just don't. The low number of guns means that brawling is inefficient. You really ought to focus on trying to hit as many of those shells as possible at a higher range, because unfortunately that's how the meta is these days. More battleships playing at longer ranges. And in this battle, that accuracy build really pays off, as we're about to find out against this York. Bayern's 15-inch guns are technically the weakest 15-inch guns in the game. They only do 10,900 damage. The next lowest is the 11,400 of the Warspite. Something to do with lower shell weight or something. That doesn't mean that these shells don't pack a punch. Yeah, you know you've really ruined someone's day when you do 20,000 damage in a tier 6. And suddenly that York isn't feeling so confident anymore, and he's going to attempt to try a high seas fleet, circa 1916. Except he's not going to get the chance, because whilst when I come around this island, I'm suddenly going to have a very nice looking, not quite broadside, but it's a York. It doesn't have any armor. I need only look at it funny, and it'll burst into flames. Hello there, Mr. York. Unfortunately, you're not going back to Kyle. In fact, you're going to meet the Bismarck. Kreuzer zerstört, Herr Cologne. But it was one of ours. Shush. It's a game. It's fine. It was the enemy. He was painted red, see? Now, despite the fact that I've just deleted the enemy York, I'm not feeling too confident, because though just right there are the other 2 battleships on my team, there's no battleships over on the western flank, which at this time makes me think that Oh no, we're gonna get fucked, aren't we? I needn't have worried though. Turns out most of the enemy team was actually on this flank. There's literally only a destroyer and the enemy carrier over in the west, which means actually most of the enemy team is facing us, and our artillery is not looking too healthy. And neither was our Mayhan. And we're facing off against an Indianapolis, a King George V, and there's a New York class battleship on the way. Meanwhile, the enemy has decided that they're going to start capping Bravo, with the Furutaka and the Duke of Gloucester capping out. In the meantime, I'm firing upon this King George V, as his majority 25mm armour is unable to withstand my 15-inch shells. And that's when the enemy Gneisenau makes his presence known, as he appears in the channel heading towards Cap Charlie. And our Mayhan has been caught almost totally by surprise. He's dumped his torpedoes and he's also dropping a smoke screen, but that's actually giving the Gneisenau cover. I mean, the Gneisenau has just fired, which means we can still see him, but the Mayhan has run aground, and he's providing a very nice, solid-looking smoke screen that the Gneisenau can fade into. And because the Mayhan has run aground, it means he's a sitting duck, and it's not the Gneisenau who takes him out, but in fact the enemy New Mexico, which means we're shortly facing down all 4 of the enemy battleships, and an Indianapolis, and there's only 3 of us. The Gneisenau does disappear into the smokescreen, but he was travelling fast enough that the smokescreen isn't going to provide him enough cover, and there he is. We can see him full broadside, and it could have been a better salvo, but 9,500 damage will certainly do. We've got the Nelson firing upon him as well, secondaries blazing, but we must also keep in mind that that is a Gneisenau, and he almost certainly has launched his torpedoes. That's why I'm nosing in like this, showing us, oh Christ, that's actually pretty well aimed. Fortunately, I was at enough of an angle that I only take 1 instead of taking 2 or 3. The secondaries continue to pummel this Gneisenau whilst I fire my shells towards the rear of that Gneisenau, hoping that they penetrate through the 25mm of stern plating. Of course, both of us only have 25mm of bow and stern armour, and we're both armed with 50-inch guns that can overmatch that sort of armour. So I'm under just as much threat as he is. However, he's also on fire, and is a much lower health, and I can afford to take a couple of hits. He can't. So yeah, I ran aground. It was more of a tactical beaching rather than accidental. I was expecting that if I continued going into Charlie, then that Gneisenau would have more torpedoes on the way. Those torpedoes on the Gneisenau only take about a minute to reload, maybe a little bit more. Either way though, that Gneisenau was going to launch torpedoes. He was getting desperate, and yeah, there we go. That was actually pretty well aimed. If I'd stayed run aground there, he would have hit me. However, a Tier 7 battleship pushing into Charlie has invited another member of the enemy team into Charlie, the Tier 5 heavy cruiser Furutaka. Now, the Furutaka is not as much of a threat. Well, threat is relative. It has 8-inch guns, but it also has 8 torpedoes, 4 on each side, and they're a lot deadlier than the torpedoes on the Gneisenau. But a Furutaka is a lot more fragile than a Gneisenau, and certainly when it's presenting a nice broadside. Now, as juicy as that broadside is, that's telling me something. That Furutaka is launching torpedoes. I could, theoretically, turn left, get my rear turrets in action, but I'm staying bow on, and there we go, there's the torpedoes. But I misjudged this, and I eat another one on the nose. I thought that was going to skim off my bow. That was a hit I couldn't really afford to take, but at least the Furutaka is dead. However, a lot has happened, and I wasn't paying attention until now. Both of the battleships that were accompanying me are dead. The Nelson was killed by the Gneisenau, which is why some of his shots appeared to be missing me, but they were actually aimed at the Nelson. And whilst the enemy King George V has died, our King George V is also dead. And now there's 2 battleships bearing down on me. The good news is, the enemy team has been almost completely neutered. We still have an aircraft carrier, they don't. We still have a destroyer, they don't. However, their cruiser is that Indianapolis. Our cruiser is a Furitaka, and a stock one as well, I believe. Also, all 3 of the remaining enemy ships are very close to my position, whilst my remaining ships are quite some distance away. I at least have the carrier providing support, but it did appear that he was launching an auto drop on that New Mexico. The good news is, the New Mexico is certainly the larger threat than the New York. The New Mexico has had to take evasive action against those torpedo bombers, but the New York is still steaming straight ahead, meaning that the New York is going to be my first target. So, I'm slowing down, hanging around, ready to pump a broadside of 8 15-inch guns into, well, the broadside of a Tier 5 American battleship. I'm not expecting any citadels. I think the citadel on the New York is a bit trollish, and it's also very slow. Patience is a virtue, waiting just for the right moment for all 8 guns to be able to fire without hitting the islands. And that looks good enough. 16,000 damage, dual attack from the main battery and the secondary battery. The secondaries aren't hitting a lot, but they've already set 3 fires upon that New York. And clearly, he can't repair any of it. He doesn't have a damage control party ready. I'm under fire from the Indianapolis, who isn't as close to me as I expected, but that New York, I don't know what he used his damage control on. More shells into his side. Another 7,500 damage. That New York, he's burning to death. I didn't think the secondaries on the Bayern could set fires, but I've been proven wrong. Indianapolis is on pretty low health. Fire my forward 2 gun turrets off. We're only going to get a single over-penetration from that salvo, but there's the New Mexico. He could easily delete me here, but he's firing high explosive. We get an arsonist in a Bayern by killing the New York. Like, I don't remember when I last got an arsonist. I think it was probably in something British battleship style. But we just killed a New York by fire in a Bayern. Final salvo of the game, unfortunately occluded by the island. I thought those shells were going to go over. They didn't. Game over. That's almost 160,000 damage at Tier 6. Yeah, I know for a fact that is not the highest amount of damage that you can do it in a Tier 6 battle. Like, almost certainly, people have done 200,000 damage. Maybe even 300,000. I don't, maybe not 300,000, but certainly over 200,000 damage in a Tier 6 battleship. But 160,000 is bloody impressive. Was I carrying that game? I'm not entirely sure, to be honest, but certainly in the end, it did all come down to me, more or less, with a little bit of help from the carrier. That was one hell of a game. And certainly, I think I'll be playing the Bayern a bit more. Well, I'll make it one of my aims. Anyway, that's it for this video. I'll see you in the next one, folks, and until then, good night.